Welcome to the show. I'm Nick Gromicko. Today I'm with my good friend Joe Farsetta. He's the Professional Development Director for InterNACHI and for the Master Inspector Certification Board. He also does training for the inspection industry, and he runs the ADRS. Joe, thanks for being on the show.
Nice to see you, Nick.
Let's
Thanks
start with
for having me.
ADRS.
Sure.
What is it? What's it about? How did it form?
It's the best kept secret in InterNACHI. It's a alternate dispute and resolution service designed specifically for NACHI members, and its purpose is to try and avert lawsuits before they happen.
ADRS, it's a completely separate organization from InterNACHI, am I right?
Absolutely. It's a separate and distinct entity. It's independent of the International Association of Certified Home Inspectors.
Okay, and how does it work?
It's a subscription-based service, meaning InterNACHI members subscribe to it. The cost is $90 a year, and it compels a complaining party to try arbitration and mediation prior to bringing a conventional lawsuit.
So a lot of consumers, they want to vent, they want some place to go with their complaint with the inspector. You give them that place to go?
Absolutely. We give them that place to go. We do field their complaints. We coach them what they need to do to build a case against an inspector. And oftentimes they discover how difficult it is if an inspector has been thorough, what it really means to prevail in court or through arbitration.
And a lot of complaints, especially in our industry, they have no merit.
Yes, they have no merit, but we are neutral. So what we try to do is we try to get the folks to tell their side of the story clearly and concisely, and bring it forward intelligently. And if it does have merit, then we move it out to a neutral, and the neutral tries mediation first, and then arbitration.
So it's a lot easier on the inspector because he then sometimes settles with ADRS by paying? Is that how it works?
No, he doesn't pay ADRS. What happens is if a party makes a complaint against an inspector, the first thing that needs to happen is to take advantage of the service. The party that's being complained against must be a member of ADRS. Otherwise...
so in other words, you can't buy the fire insurance once the house is on fire?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
They need to be a member of ADRS prior
and that's
to...
only $90 a year?
It's $90 a year.
Okay.
Right. A complaining party contacts us.
And a complaining party would be like a consumer who's not happy with his inspection report?
Yes, a consumer would contact us. The first thing we do is we verify that the inspector does subscribe to ADRS, and then from there we listen to what the complaint is, and we coach them along the process.
Now, what if he doesn't belong to ADRS?
Then we
can't help him.
We can't help them. Then the alternative is if the client, the inspector's client, wants to go to traditional, I won't say traditional, other arbitration services, those costs could be anywhere from $1,500 to $2,000 to bring an action against the inspector. If the inspector loses, the inspector's going to pay for that.
Or a lawsuit.
Absolutely, or a lawsuit. And as soon as you get involved with a lawsuit, what's going to happen is if the inspector does not carry errors and omissions insurance, they're going to hire an attorney. Even if they do carry E&O, sometimes they have to hire an attorney or they have to pay out of their deductible to defend them. Whether it's frivolous or whether it has merit, there's going to be significant out-of-pocket expenses.
So it's really better for the inspector, even if he is at fault, to sort of have this settled by you up front, sort of on the front line before it goes any further. Because if it goes any further, everyone loses, am I right?
Yes, and the unique thing about this service is it is made specifically for home inspectors. We don't arbitrate or mediate any other types of cases. It's only for home inspectors. More importantly, it's only for NACHI home inspectors.
So in a lawsuit, often the home inspector has to hire an attorney, and the attorney has to get educated about the home inspection industry, and then he has the job of educating the judge about the home inspection industry so that the judge can rule in the home inspector's favor. All this education doesn't have to take place with you. You're already real familiar with the industry.
That's true, and with the other method, the clock is ticking. You're paying attorneys by the hour,
right?
And in this mode, you're not doing that. In this mode, you have a neutral that is hearing the evidence, and
that knows the standards of practice.
That knows the standards of practice and knows the industry and is sympathetic to both parties. We're neutral. There's two sides to every story, and somewhere in the middle is the truth.
Okay, well, prove it. Consumers who use this service to file a complaint, how many of them then go on to, in other words, they're dissatisfied with ADRS and go on to file a lawsuit or do something further with the inspector? Statistically,
approximately 80% of the complaints that we receive go no further. They don't even go to arbitration. Because arbitration is
You mean they don't even go to your ADRS at all? You handle
No.
even before that?
They come to us first, but prior to us charging them the fee to initiate arbitration, because that fee is borne on the complaining party, once they hear the types of things that we're going to ask them to provide as far as evidence. Even before we notify the inspector that there's an action, a lot of times they can't meet that basic burden of proof, and it goes away.
So a lot of times you're educating the complainant as well.
Exactly, and there's a lot of things that go into a complaint. A lot of it is emotional on their part. They feel that they've been wronged, and in reality, they really need to take an objective view. We teach them to do that because that's what we're going to do. So the burden of proof is on them to look at everything, all the circumstances, what was happening on the day of the inspection, what agreement they signed, what the standard of practice says, and what actually happened.
Well, as a first line of defense, I think $90 is probably the best line of defense per dollar that is out there for the inspector.
It is. It's a cheap date, and more than that, we're rolling out a new service now. We're going to have a monthly newsletter trying to educate inspectors on trends in the industry and how to protect themselves against having complaints come against them. A lot of times it's in the way they write the report, or it's incorrectly setting people's expectations as far as what they're going to be doing.
Now, where can we go to get more information about ADRS? Do you know the website address?
Sure, www.NACHIADRS.com.
NACHIADRS.com.
Absolutely. So the website's been up for close to 4 years. It's a great site. It explains the entire process, explains how to apply for membership.
Is there any other hidden cost in this? It's just $90 a year.
It's $90 a year to the inspector. There are some additional costs as with any legal action. However, they're relatively low. The cost of arbitration is only $300, so that's what we pay our neutrals to hear the case, and any other incidentals such as cost of the copy, materials.
Right. Well, expenses you'd have to pay anyway.
Exactly, shipping costs, because realistically, if let's say an arbitrated result can't be found,
right.
Or if it's totally, you have a totally disgruntled client and they decide to move it out of arbitration after the arbitrator has decided that they're either wrong or a settlement's been proposed, what happens then is that all the documents that are prepared, evidentiary documents, both sides of the story, are then given to both parties. So if somebody is foolish enough to take it to a court, it's as if discovery has already taken place. All this evidence is now in the people's hands, and when they present it to the judge, the judge has everything in front of him, and we're very thorough with what we do. The process is really quite complete, and we leave no stone unturned.
All right, so let me pin you down. If I don't have any claims
right.
for the year,
right.
do I have any other costs other than that $90 for this protection?
Nope, absolutely not, and you get a monthly newsletter out of it also that helps you even further.
That's great. I want to go on to a new subject.
Right.
Education.
Okay.
What do you got going on in the way of education now?
Well, we have a CMI program, and we're doing CMI Fast Track, which is a 20-module course. What we found, even through the ADRS service, is that where inspectors are failing in one way or another is in incorrectly setting expectations, in arbitrarily exceeding standards of practice. When you exceed a standard of practice, what it really means is you're no longer complying to it. So you have to have specific valid reasons for exceeding that, and in the way they write their reports. So one of the things that we do in our course in order to fast track you is to require you to examine vignettes of inspection.
Examine what?
Vignettes. So a vignette would be either a video segment or a group of photographs. And there are a certain number of defects in those photographs, and what you're going to be required to do is identify a significant portion of the defects and describe each defect in 7 sentences or less without the use of checklists, without the use of inspection reporting software, and without any disclaimers.
So I get
no
it.
fluff.
It's like an actual inspection.
It's an inspection, but more importantly, what we're trying to teach inspectors is without the ability to effectively communicate what you're finding, you're going to wind up with problems down the road. We've learned this through
legal
ADRS.
Problems.
Absolutely. You've incorrectly set the client's expectations. You have not effectively communicated what you have seen. You're relying too much on canned verbiage in some respects, or simply
a lot of pre-canned narratives.
Pre-canned narratives are okay as long as they're accurately describing what you're seeing. And if you don't have the ability to do that, you can't call yourself a master inspector. Inspections is 50% science and 50% art, in my opinion. And the art comes from your ability to communicate. You could be the brightest person in the world, know everything there is to know about every code, every inspection technique, have every tool there is available in the industry. If you can't convey that information effectively to your client,
It's just like a doctor with bedside manner.
Absolutely. The best doctors are good listeners, and the best doctors clearly, calmly, and completely, in an understandable fashion, explain to you what's going on and what's wrong with you.
Now, you provide a lot of what I would say advanced continuing education and advanced training for the industry.
Right.
And I see that your courses are now getting approved by all the states everywhere. Can you explain to me some of the courses that you offer? Do you have these one-day courses, the WELL course, is the commercial building course 1 or 2 days?
It's 1 day.
And what else do you have?
We have the Certified Well Sampler course. We have electricity, which includes grounding and bonding.
And you wrote some of the online courses for InterNACHI.
Absolutely. And as you know, I'm quite passionate about inspectors and what we do and what we should be doing and how we wind up in trouble. So, you know, I helped you with the structural course. And
The safety course is a great one, by the way.
Safety course is excellent. I think
every inspector ought to take that safety course at least once or twice.
And, you know, safety is not only important to the inspector, but, you know, we put ourselves at unnecessary risk because we feel we're obligated to. And your life is worth far more than what the cost of the inspection is.
And I want to congratulate you InterNACHI members who demanded that your safety course, which is an online course and a free course, be open up to the entire industry. You don't have to be an InterNACHI member to take the safety course. We hope it saves some lives. Yeah,
all you need to do is get into a crawl space and get bit by the wrong spider, or get bit by the wrong snake, or fall off a roof, as I did, and you start to realize.
Did you fall on your head?
No, it didn't fall on my head. Fell on my feet.
That was the rumor.
And no, it didn't fall on my head. But my wife might disagree with that. But no, I didn't. But the WELL class, you know, the WELL class is unlike any other course of its type in the country.
I think we just got that approved in Texas for in track.
Yeah, it's a fantastic course. One of the best compliments that I got from a recent graduate was he is a water treatment plant operator, right. Certified by his state. And at noontime, he stood up when we broke for lunch, and he told the class that he learned more in the previous 4 hours that he learned in 2 weeks.
Well, I think that's because we're both from the Northeast and we talk fast.
We talk very fast. We talk very fast.
You're from New York.
Yeah. The commercial class is an excellent class. We boil it down into 8 hours of intense education. We go over standards. We include NACHI's commercial standard of practice as a best practice. Standards are wonderful, but if they're you know, they can't just be about disclaimers. They can't just be about what you should do and what you might do. I believe that where NACHI's commercial standard of practice exceeds everyone else's is that it is a blueprint for what you need to do on an inspection. So it goes beyond just the words, and I call it a best practice because it maps out for you. And really, I have to credit a chapter president that I visited, and we taught his chapter. It was a very successful meeting where he said, you know, it would be great if at the end of the class you just say, you know, if I needed to do this, what do I need to do? So we specifically incorporate the commercial standard of practice at the end of the class.
The commercial standards of practice, InterNACHI's ComSop, it really is geared for that niche where the Empire State Building, they're not going to call a home inspector to look at it. And a pizza shop, they're not going to want to pay for a complete exhaustive inspection. Am I right?
Exactly.
This niche is kind of in the middle. It has to be affordable, yet meaningful.
Well, you know, we'll go back to the basics. We'll go back to setting the client's expectations.
Give me an example of a commercial inspection that one of our guys would typically be doing. Would it be a pizza shop or a diner or something?
My theory is that the most common type of commercial inspection that most inspectors are going to encounter will probably involve food services, delis, restaurants.
Because they switch hands a lot.
They switch hands a lot, and you know, these people sometimes can't afford not to have an inspection. A case in point is in my own county, we had a restaurant owner actually have an employee go out and stomp garlic bulbs in an alleyway with his feet, and a person captured this on camera. It went to the newspaper, of course.
You are from New York, aren't you?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Of course, the restaurant quickly closed down. Nobody would go there anymore, but the person that bought that restaurant didn't bother having an inspection performed, and you know, one of the things we teach our students is to upsell a little bit. So a document review is something that you can perform, and that you, if there's an opportunity to perform it, you should charge more money for it. Had this buyer paid an inspector to go and do some basic research, such as health department records, they would have found this huge problem that had happened recently.
And a lot of this goes back to bedside manner, where you have to listen to your client and figure out how much he wants
That's what it's all about. We're not in business
exactly,
not to
deliver
make
what
money.
he wants.
Absolutely. So, you have heavy-duty commercial inspections, which might be, a 100-acre campus with 14 buildings, and then you have what I would call light commercial inspection, which is...
Do you consider an apartment building a commercial inspection?
Absolutely. Anything 4 dwelling units and above is a commercial inspection.
What about the building we're in right now?
Absolutely commercial inspection. The majority of what's out there real estate-wise would fall into the commercial category.
Right.
If you're going to say that you comply, and this is one of the largest problems that we see even with the ADRS, is if you say you're going to comply with a standard of practice, you, number one, had better comply with that standard
Right.
of practice, and you better understand what you're signing up for.
So without a standards of practice, you're really relying on the scope of work or the statement of work. What's the difference between the scope of work and statement of work?
Well, let's talk about some contract documents, and this is one of the things that I teach in my commercial inspection class is you have a number of contract documents, and the first one that everybody typically relies on is their inspection agreement.
Right.
And as my friend Joe Ferry will tell you, the purpose of the inspection agreement is to memorialize an understanding between the parties. It may or may not help you in all cases. So because commercial inspections are typically much more encompassing, and a lot of times there's a larger dollar value involved, I encourage the inspector to listen to the client and decide what the client's needs are, and then to create what I call a statement of work. Some people call it a scope of work, some people call it a statement of work. Technically there are some differences, but
The scope of work is kind of what you're doing. The statement of work distills it to
the scope of work is
paper and pencil.
the scope of work is the scope, and the statement of work will describe what your work product is. So while somebody can argue that they didn't understand what's in an inspection agreement because of all the fine print, they're going to be hard pressed to argue that they didn't understand what was in a statement of work, because that statement of work reflects what the inspector was told to do.
right. It's unique to that client.
It's
So
unique to the client.
It's not fine print. It's their words.
It's plain language, which is excellent. It's clearly written. It's usually in 10, 11, or 12-point font. And
in our actually ComSop document pack on NACHI.org, we actually have a scope of work document.
yeah, it's scope of work, and really what people need to do is they need to customize it to what they need it to be for. But in an order of precedence of contract documents, you've got a number of things. So your statement of work is what you're going to do. It's backed up upon the generic inspection agreement, which limits legally everything that may not be covered.
Right.
And those two documents are really there to help
And the
protect
standards
you.
of practice.
And the standards of practice, absolutely. One of the first things, if you get sued, that any insurance company will ask you is, whose standard of practice do you follow? And they're going to want to look at whether or not you follow the standard of practice. And going back to the ADRS service, that's one of the things that we coach the complaining party. You need to go back and actually look at your complaint and make sure that they have, or find out where you feel that they have failed to meet their obligation that they said that they would perform under a standard of practice.
Now, after many years, you were instrumental in getting the Certified Master Inspector Professional Designation, which is a federal certification mark in the United States and a trademark in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
We finally got that all done, and it's running pretty well. What is your opinion of what we ended up with after all this work?
I think that CMI is truly the diamond in the rough, meaning it's the diamond, but what I mean by in the rough is that not enough people are really taking advantage of what it means. With licensing, creating a minimum standard.
Dumps a lot of people into the industry. Licensing.
It dumps a lot of people into the industry, and it grandfathers people that maybe shouldn't have been in the industry simply because they've performed 10,000 inspections, but for all we know, they may have been bad inspections. We really don't know, good, bad,
Right.
or ugly. Unfortunately, the insurance industry doesn't publish a lot of data as far as types of claims that they've paid out through the years. So really what you're coming down to is you have a professional certification in CMI, but you have a clear market differentiator.
Because it's Certified Master Inspector.
It's Certified
It's a great
Master.
name.
It's, I would probably wager that if you, just from a title standpoint, if you
Right.
if you said home inspector, certified
Professional
inspector,
Inspector, Certified Property Inspector.
that if I had to choose among 5 or 6 titles, if I saw Certified Master Inspector, not knowing anything
Right.
else, I choose Certified Master
We actually
Inspector.
ran that survey a couple of times, actually live on the street a couple of times as well.
And I think if you peel the onion skin back and you look at the program itself, it's clearly unique. First of all, NACHI is
It's pretty
unique.
meaningful. I mean, 1,000 inspections or CE hours is a pretty meaningful designation, don't you think?
Well, yes, it's pretty meaningful, but I mean, one of the problems I have with our industry in general is we have too many arbitrary numbers. They're just things that are arbitrary out there.
Right.
Some associations don't take life experience into account towards gaining any sort of professional designation.
And some count 250 inspections done all wrong as a method of getting full membership.
Well, yeah, and we won't go down that road, but
let's go down the licensing road for a minute.
Let's go down the licensing road. Okay.
Licensing to me seems to be commoditizing our industry. Once everybody's licensed and they're all on the same state list, holding this exact same credential, how do they differentiate themselves other than through dropping their price? Unfortunately, seems to commoditize our industry initially right off the bat. What do we do as inspectors to distinguish ourselves above and beyond another guy who's equally as licensed?
Well, I think
remember, if I've been in business 20 years and you've been in business one day, we're both equally licensed.
We're both equally licensed, and simply because you've been in business for 20 years doesn't, in my mind, mean that you may have been a wonderful inspector 20 years ago or 30 years ago, but there's differences in construction methodologies and in materials that are used.
Technologies we use on an inspection as well.
Technology is different.
And you're not a big fan of infrared cameras, am I right?
Well, it's not that I'm a big fan of infrared cameras. I just see a parade of pain coming down the road in the next few years because
the expectation's too high for
expectations
them.
are
X-ray vision and all that nonsense.
Yeah, X-ray specs and a crystal ball rolled into one. I think the technology is wonderful, but I think it needs to be properly, the lack of a better term, related to cameras, properly focused. If you're doing energy audits, I think it's wonderful. If you suspect something, and this is an extra tool to verify something, I think it's wonderful. But I think that some people are purely using it as a marketing differentiator.
Right.
And I think what's going to happen is, getting back to what we see in ADRS is, if you've incorrectly set the client's expectations,
right.
And they think you have this magical machine that's going to, provide some sort of a warranty to them that you're going to find everything under the sun. That's just not the real world. And I suspect that someday somebody is going to launch a lawsuit against an inspector, unfortunately, because of miscommunication or a misperception.
Right. We actually had a judge say that the agreement didn't matter, that the marketing mattered more, because that's what attracted the client to the inspector was his marketing. He had a bunch of code certification logos on his brochure, and the house wasn't up to code. And the inspector says, well, in the agreement, I say I don't do code work, but the marketing does. So your marketing sort of has to reflect what you're doing on the inspection and what service you're actually providing, am I right?
Absolutely, and like I said, beyond that, it's your ability to communicate. You have to build a rapport with your client. You have to build their confidence. They have to understand that you are fallible, because we are all fallible. They have to respect you at the end of the day, that you have done absolutely the best job you could possibly have done during that inspection. And where some inspectors wind up in problems is that they don't do this. They're either in a rush, or they're feeling pressured, or they feel that the client feels that the relationship between the realtor and the inspector was maybe a little bit too cozy. Whether this is correct or incorrect, it's just the perception. And it works against the inspector.
Back to licensing, another thing that happens is a lot of schools pop up when licensing gets adopted, and so they start pumping out guys who are just as equally licensed as everyone else.
That's correct. Licensing provides typically a minimum bar. So take CMI and where we are going with the courses.
Where are you taking that? How are we going to distinguish CMI above and beyond a guy who got his license yesterday afternoon from the school down the street?
Well, I think in some of the advanced courses that are offered, clearly the well class is unlike anything else that's out there. The commercial class is unlike anything else that's out there. Everything that we do as far as courses go, I think goes the extra mile.
Now, it seemed like a couple of years ago we were having difficulty getting these courses approved by states for state continuing education, because they were arguing that they were far outside the standards of practice. They actually were above and beyond or outside of them. And then it seems like this year they're all approving these advanced courses. They see some merit in taking an advanced training course. Are you getting the same sense out there?
I really think it depends upon how the course is presented. I think at the end of the day, if the course is intended to improve the inspector's knowledge, and what that does is that translates into a more complete inspection.
Is that what CMI is trying to do? Absolutely,
that's what CMI is really all about. We talked about one of the things that my course has in it, and enables the person to fast track a bit, is it doesn't matter to me that you've inspected 1,000 one-bedroom condominiums. I think that's way too arbitrary. That in and of itself, I don't think really qualifies a person to be a CMI, personally. I don't think 1,000 hours of education on its own qualifies a person to be a CMI. I don't think that a magic number of 500 inspections qualifies a person to be a CMI.
They're indicators, but they don't guarantee anything.
We're too tied into arbitrary things. I think it really comes down to beyond question and answer. I think it's your ability to observe and report. One of the things that we have in one of my CMI courses, one of my modules, is something I call improving the inspector's ability to see. And so that goes beyond technology. That we talk about things that affect an inspector's ability to see. Prior to us shooting this segment, a lot of time was spent on proper lighting, on proper volume levels, on the backgrounds being right, so that it comes across on the broadcast correctly. Well, people don't realize how much light and painted surfaces and edges affect what an inspector sees, because especially where we can't get up very close and touch something. So we talk about that. We talk about something called unintentional blindness. We're scanning things so quickly. Everybody has fun watching movies and seeing subtle differences between scene changes. And oh, rewind that. You see her hair was in a different position. When the camera flashed back to her. Most of the time that happens so quickly the mind doesn't pick it up. Well, when you really think about what's going on during an inspection, our eyes are scanning so quickly that sometimes we don't pick up those subtle differences. Sometimes we feel rushed.
So teaching an inspector to do that in the 2 hours he's walking around that house trying to do everything else.
Fatigue, distractions, noisiness,
safety,
big factors. Areas that are obscured from the inspector's view. What's going on in Texas right now with proposed changes to TREC's standard of practice, where inspectors are going to have to or may be required to move things. That's going to be a big difference in the industry.
That changes everything.
That changes everything because, and by the way, I think unfairly it changes everything because, I may feel that Barbie doll over there is, insignificant, and in reality it may be worth, $2,000. Who knows?
Right.
Who assigns the value? So if I break it, once the inspector touches it, it's the inspector's fault automatically. Right. This is why inspectors need to keep up on trends. This is why we've gone to in ADRS to providing a monthly newsletter to people to try.
And the United States is 50 different countries, really, with all different roles.
50 different countries, and all different flavors and all different.
And the Canadians are that's a different group altogether.
Market to market, it's different. Yes, Canada certainly has some.
I mean, from east to west, it's almost a different world, not just a different country.
Absolutely, Ontario to Alberta is like completely
world.
different, and they're all great guys up there, and they all have their own.
How are you doing with them on a message board? You having fun with them out there?
They're, I'll tell you what. When people meet each other, it's really
much different than it is on the
thing.
message board.
It's excellent.
It's hard to get inflection across on a message board.
I made some. Well, sometimes inflection on a message board is okay, but I made some great friends up there, and I want to take my family up to Canada just to experience.
Of course, we're heavily Canadian based, really. I mean, our last year's convention was in Canada. We do a lot of work in Ontario. I think our heaviest concentration per capita is in Ontario and in some of the Canadian provinces. So, but the message board is it's a battle.
Sometimes a message board can be a battle, and sometimes battles can be healthy. Sometimes it gets a little bit personal. But you know what? NACHI has an unfettered, unmoderated, for the most part, message board. It's kind of unique. People complain about it, but it's the largest, most successful message board. I was poster number 2. Irby Crowfoot was the first person to ever post on the message board when Chris Morell and you, I've been with NACHI a long time. Right. So Irby was number 1, I was number 2, and I think Irby's first post was, what are we going to do to get this message board kicked off?
I think there's some predictions that we wouldn't see our 100th post. That was probably about 500,000 posts ago.
There's all different message boards out there. You know what? You have to go to where you're comfortable. The NACHI message board, you certainly can't be thin-skinned.
Is that because it's unmoderated?
Emotions run high in our industry. We have people that are highly intelligent. We are the only industry, in my opinion, where people intentionally put themselves between the rock and the hard place. We are the unwilling participant in being between the, all eyes being on us, to, everybody's hoping the inspection goes well. The best inspectors, explain to their clients, we're going to let the chips fall where they may. That's why people hire professional realtors and professional inspectors. The inspector does their best to, not to decide whether the client should buy or not buy, but to help the client make an informed decision. And if the house is not right for whatever reason, then it's the job of the realtor to find the client the next house. But all eyes are on us, the mortgage person, the attorney, the buyer's agent, the seller's agent. They're all looking at us one way. Our clients are looking at us the other way. And we have an obligation, first and foremost, to our client. So
we're the only independent, unbiased party to a real estate transaction. Everybody else has their skin in it in one way or the other.
And I think that people forget that. And I think that as an industry, we don't nearly go far enough to extol the virtues of a quality inspection. And considering that we are the lowest paid person as part of that real estate transaction, yet we carry the highest liability, it's unfair. And until we as an industry get together and do a better job of explaining to people our true value, we will forever be fighting each other and bashing each other, whether it's within an association on a message board or whether it's across association, for the guy that just came to town and maybe he's been 30 years in business, but maybe he has a pension, as opposed to the guy who does this full-time, relies on his winnings at the end of the day to put bread on the table. You got the guy that's always going to go out there and roll everything into a $300 inspection. Right. And that's not to say that inspection isn't a good inspection. It's just to say that I think the pricing model is backward. I personally feel that the inspector should get the most because we carry the most liability and we have the largest responsibility of everybody.
Not only that, if you do a really good job, you have almost an ethical duty to market yourself and to try to bring as many people over to use your good works as you possibly can. And to do that, to be a good inspector, you have to charge. You have to pay for this continuing education. You have to pay for your tools and everything, your insurance, and you can't do that unless you're charging.
You can't do that unless you're charging, and you also can't do that unless you have a feeling of self-worth. One of the reasons why I was so passionate about the safety courses is I feel that inspectors unduly put themselves at risk because they feel obligated to do so. Like I said, until you fall off a roof, and you call your wife because you're shaken up and she wants you to go to the hospital, and your client is kind of indifferent, which is what happened to me. After I fell off the roof, the client asked me what condition the roof was in, which really didn't make me feel very good. But that was an eye-opening experience.
I'd be worried about what the condition the sidewalk was in you fell on.
No, the sidewalk was fine. It was actually a deck. The gutter wasn't good because I tore it off the house.
Did you replace the deck?
No, I didn't replace the deck.
Now listen, you and I talking about fighting on a message board and stuff. You and I have had some very vicious fights by telephone.
Never vicious.
Often.
Never vicious.
They get a little over the top. Maybe we should start moving these arguments over onto the message board for entertainment purposes. What do you think of that suggestion?
I don't think that's going to serve any useful purpose. You and I would like to think that of all the people, me seeing the glass half empty and you being the eternal optimist.
I see the glass half full and everything.
You always see the glass half full. I think it's a wonderful mix. I think we had a good, meaningful discussion about life and safety issues, and at the end of the day, you kind of won me over, and sometimes I win you over. But at the end of the day, we still get together and have a good time. And when I'm cut, I bleed NACHI's colors. So I mean,
Well, I think it's a great combination, you and I,
and
we'll keep going.
Absolutely.
And helping the industry. And thank you all for being here, and we'll see you next time.